we'll officially get started on our webinar today. This is the webinar entitled Germ Busters, Ongoing Strategies for Clean and Healthy Facilities. And as you look at this first opening slide, you can see we have three panelists. We'll introduce them in a moment. And our sponsor is Tomi with the Steramis product. And we'll be looking at that in a moment as well. So as we think about our webinar today, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Jeff Cross. I'm your moderator. Assisting me today on this webinar is Martha Schmidt. She's our virtual events producer. And Kathleen Misovic is our CMM managing editor. And she'll be taking care of the questions as you put those into the portal, whether it's a Q&A question or a chat question. So she'll be watching for that and compiling those for the end of our webinar. Cleaning and Maintenance Management Magazine is your magazine, whether you're a building service contractor, you are taking care of facilities, whatever your role is, it's the magazine with content for you. You can go to cmmonline.com and subscribe. And I also want to mention ISSA, which is producing this webinar. CMM is part of the ISSA family. If you're not an ISSA member, be sure to look into that. That is your best strategic move for your organization to be part of the ISSA family. So before we get started, just want to mention a few things. This is all about you, those who are participants, and I see some are still coming in. Have the chat feature open. Use the Q&A portal at the bottom of your screen, because as we do this webinar, we want to hear from you. What issues are you facing? What can we help you with? Our three panelists are experts. They've been doing this a long time. Ask them your questions, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. They'll also comment on the chat questions as they would like to, as they see those populating in that function. Everyone wants to know, how do I see this webinar later? Maybe you have to leave, or you registered and you can't be here for the entire webinar, or you want to share this with your colleagues. It'll be available as a link to you in a few days. You'll get an email. It'll also be on cmmonline.com. So you can always reach out to me or Kathleen or anyone on our side, and we'll get you that link. So this will be on our site and available in a few days. Don't worry about making noise, except for our panelists. Everyone is muted. So that's for your safety and ours. So just enjoy the webinar, and you don't have to worry about that. Here's our first sponsor message, so enjoy this. And we thank Tomi for their sponsorship of our webinar today. So just as a reminder, like I said earlier, your questions, you can put them in the chat. They might get buried a little bit, but the Q&A portal is another way to do that. So whichever one you want to use, put your questions in there, and Kathleen will be sure to compile those, and we'll cover as many of those as we can during the webinar. And we could also do some follow-up afterwards as well. These are our panelists today. We have Kimberly Thomas. She's the assistant to the AVP at Facilities Management Division, University of Georgia. So Kimberly's with us today. We also have Evan Sirlin. He's the associate vice president at Core America. And Kristen Sanchez, vice president of VHA at SBM Management Services. So these are our panelists. Evan, Kimberly, Kristen, welcome, and thank you for giving your time to our audience today. Here is our first chat question. So for all of you on the webinar, and there's a lot of you on today, put in the Q&A or the chat, prefer the chat for this one, but what are your biggest concerns regarding infection prevention, cleaning for health, or other cleaning or disinfection issues? So whether you do it right now, or maybe as we go through the webinar, you think of something, put it in the chat, and we'll keep an eye out for that, because something may pop in your mind as far as an issue you have, a concern, or a question, and we want to make sure we cover that. Michelle says, getting other departments on board with our purpose. I think we're going to talk about that today, aren't we? Yes. Good points. Awareness to the clients and customers. Alicia mentioned that. Lori wants to know, oh, Lori just told us who she was. Danielle, having the appropriate amount of staff to handle cleaning effectively and efficiently. We're going to cover that. I know that's one of our speaking points today. So keep them coming. We'll keep an eye on this. Let's move on. So what we're going to do is get started with some high-level observations. We're going to ask our panelists, what have you done to enhance cleaning and ensure infection prevention as part of your organization's plan? Because we know you have cleaning, you also have infection prevention. They're not always the same thing, but they should be, shouldn't they? They should be working together. Let's start with you, Kimberly. Start with the ladies. Evan, we'll get to you last on this question. So Kimberly, why don't you start us off? What about your organization?
Thanks, Jeff. And want to just say it's a really great opportunity to be here. I'm representing the University of Georgia as having recently retired with over 34 years here at UGA, working in the higher ed spectrum as well as K through 12, executive director in our local school district in charge of facilities. You know, it's been very key for us to have written plans. And I firmly believe that you can't have consistency to be able to communicate and train your staff, as well as be able to communicate what you're doing to your customers without a written plan. So what we have really focused on here recently is making sure that we have refresher training for all of our staff, going over procedures that we want them to do and being able to share that out with our customers, making sure that with our building service worker academy, that we go through that and really detail what we feel is acceptable. We have worked very hard with our College of Public Health, as well as our local health district, to bring them on board so that they know, and we have not just our opinion, but basing it on industry standard, our public health, our state regulations, so that we can have the best program that is written. And then it's our job as leadership to make sure that we enforce what we're doing, keep training fun, but make sure that our customers as well as our staff know what are the expectations. And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about that was mentioned as far as the questions that came up is how do we engage our customers to this? And I think we'll hopefully have some really good information that we can share out. So thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Kristen, share your thoughts.
Thank you, Jeff. So I think as a janitorial provider, you know, the pandemic really changed a lot for us. You know, having to rearrange how we did things, from providing trainings to our staff members, looking at different equipment, right, throughout the pandemic. And so it's really changed where we are now. For us, it was the implementation of a color-coded program that we could do across the entire company. It's a little bit different, right? We're not just one facility, but we're managing facilities across the entire country and 11,000 employees. So it was an implementation of our mobile program where every employee has a mobile device, and all of their trainings, we developed trainings throughout the pandemic. We continue to develop trainings for our employees, which provide the training in actually their native language that they set on their mobile device. So them being able to, you know, access the trainings in real time from their mobile device during their working hours has really been effective for us, and being able to, you know, again, right, get our message across to the employees and assure that, you know, they have all the tools that they need to be successful.
11,000 employees?
Yes.
That to me is an impressive number. I'd love to hear from our attendees. If you want to put in the chat how many employees you might be managing, that might help our panelists see what we're dealing with here as far as keeping it organized. Kristen, I don't know how you guys do it, but that's impressive. And nationwide company, obviously, as you mentioned. Yeah. Evan, let's go to you next. What thoughts would you like to share?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. What the panelists said is great. And I agree with 100% of what they said. The training and making sure everything's documented is of utmost importance. But we are talking now about infection prevention, which maybe 5-10 years ago, with the exception of the healthcare industry, we may not have been talking about a lot. And I think cleaning for health becomes a big player since the pandemic. What goes into that, proper workloading, making sure that the employees have the right schedules, and making sure they know the difference, as Kimberly said, with training, between cleaning and between sanitizing and disinfecting and all that. And on the back end of infection prevention comes all those auditing tools to make sure that everybody's doing the right thing, whether it's a quality assurance platform that you're using to make sure that the visible dirt is being taken care of, or another instrument like ATP or blacklight inspections are being used to make sure that the invisible is being handled as well. All those things come into play, and that's what I've been seeing in the industry, and that's what Core uses in their repertoire as well.
Right. Good points. Well, thank you all for sharing that. Thinking about what clean is, as we look at our next point, how do you, as an organization, measure clean? How do you know it's clean? Because if it's clean, it should be somewhat healthy, and that should be part of your infection prevention program. And let's start with Kristen on this question. What do you think, Kristen?
Okay, great.
11,000 employees.
Right. I think that it's kind of two-part, right? You can verify that it's clean. That's the seeing, that's the smelling, that's the feeling, right, of the surfaces. And then I think you can also validate that it's clean. And as Evan mentioned, right, using the ATP device, and that's more, technology based. So I think that there's two different ways. Through the auditing process, you're able to verify it's clean. You can audit the chemicals that are being used, the dwell times, right, making sure that the dwell times are being adhered to, when you're talking about disinfecting and sanitizing. So I think those are the two kind of parameters, right, that you look at when you're talking about knowing that something is clean.
Thank you. And Evan, what do you think when you talk to your clients about this? What's the proof?
The proof is really in the qualitative scores, whether that be, again, as Kristen said and I said earlier, some sort of a qualitative quantity measurement tool to see what is clean and what is not, again, by the naked eye, and then to use some sort of instrumentation to go beyond that to see if it's in fact truly clean and if there's bioburden left on surfaces.
Mm-hmm. And Kimberly, last but not least.
Yeah, thanks. Same thing. We also utilize ATP equipment as well to measure clean, but we also, not just having our staff use that, we do walkthroughs with our customers so that they get an idea of what clean is and what we're looking for. What are our standards? So as they're seeing things and it doesn't look quite right, they have a better understanding of how to communicate that out. And I think it gives them a level of comfort to see that what we're doing hopefully matches up to what they see, so that we can all be on the same board as far as how do we keep the facilities healthy and clean for all.
Mm-hmm. Good points. So thinking about some terminology as we move on to our next point, some might say this is somewhat basic: cleaning, disinfecting, sanitizing, this terminology. But even though as cleaning professionals we might get it, not everyone that we take care of in the buildings understands it. They might interchange words. So let's spend a moment talking about this and how it can make sense to cleaning staff and building occupants. And Evan, we'll start with you. It's finally you're first up this time.
Sure. Well, those three terms have been interchanged over the years, and they really do have different meanings among them. Cleaning, which is just removal of visible dirt, is probably the first step in a true infection prevention process. The use of sanitizing and disinfecting, which have been flip-flopped over the years, really do have different meanings. Sanitizing is really going a little bit deeper than cleaning and removing of some of bacteria. But in order to really prove that a surface or an area has been cleaned properly, it needs to be disinfected once it's been cleaned. So it gets cleaned first. And disinfecting is that method of use of chemicals, but it also takes away your bacteria and your viruses that may linger on surfaces.
Good points. I don't want to repeat ourselves here. Evan covered nicely, but let's go to Kimberly next. Anything to add there?
Nothing really to add. I think you hit on
Okay.
all of those points. And also just incorporating in the process and when we're using other types of equipment, like maybe UV light in some of our areas, to make sure that our customers as well as our staff know when we have put this type of equipment into our HVAC system and incorporate it into our mechanical rooms so that they understand that cleaning, disinfection, sanitization doesn't happen just on their personal offices or on a computer table or things like that, but we're really focused on the overall health of the building, including those mechanical rooms and the HVAC systems themselves.
Good points. Kristen?
So I think that Evan and Kimberly covered it nicely. I think just something additional and something that we struggled with as a company is really getting that out there to the employees. Just because you're using a disinfectant doesn't mean that you're disinfecting the area, right? So focusing on those dwell times of the disinfectants, of the sanitizers that you're using, it's not just the chemical, but it also, it's also that dwell time and making sure that we're really, allowing the chemical to sit on the surface. And, as Evan mentioned, cleaning the surface first, right, to remove the grime and the dirt so that disinfectant or that sanitizer can really be effective.
All right. Good points. I've heard some even say that in their marketing, these cleaning companies, they'll say they sterilize. You don't want to talk about that, but we all know that that's not something that's part of this, but cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, all terminology that we want to understand and make sure that those we work for get it as well. As we move on to our next point, this is interesting to me. It's a conversation I've had like with Dr. Gavin McGregor Skinner, who's on our GBAC team here at ISSA, infectious reservoirs. I never really heard of that term until recently. Of course, I don't play in your space like you do as a cleaning professional. I gave up my cleaning career years ago. But in a building, when you think about the main issues, where do you look? I have to think the bathroom would be one of those places. But let's see. Let's start with Kimberly this time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people sometimes think, start with the bathroom, but I think it's most important to start where you're going to be most of the day, right? Right there in those personal spaces, in those classrooms, those touch points, doorknobs, the light switches, all of those things, the push bars, all of those things from the moment you get ready to enter into that building and walk all the way through and where you're going to spend most of your time. One of the things that's really important when we're doing these walkthroughs with our staff, whether it's our entry-level staff all the way up to supervision and including our contact people in the administration, where there's the dean or the admin staff, that building contact person, so that they're looking not just in the bathroom, but take a moment to look around. And then we're thinking about the filtration systems as well. As is there any places where there can be standing water? Are there any leaks and other things like that? So just getting them to think about the entire indoor environment and where things could possibly lead to problems that we need to address.
Right, good points. Evan, what do you think?
Yeah, Kimberly made some great points, and I agree that you have to look at those high touch point areas. Coming from the healthcare market, that's what we were trained on doing. 14 or 16 high touch point areas in every single room. On top of that, we were also trained, and I work with my clients on this, to look in the hard to see spaces, the dark spaces, the like Kimberly said, the dark and wet spaces, places that infectious reservoirs will tend to prosper and grow. So underneath your sinks and your toilets, your corners, your edges, the insides, not so much the outsides, but the insides of those vents that might be able to be vacuumed out or things like that. Those are the areas, aside from what Kimberly said is truly important. Those touch point areas is what we look for.
Yeah. So I guess if you can't see it, it can still hurt you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Kristen, let's go to you.
Yeah, I think that Kimberly and Evan covered it really well. I think one, in addition to restrooms, right, in addition to the high touch points that Kimberly mentioned, I think, a focus also needs to be on personal workspaces. So as a facility management company and as a janitorial provider, oftentimes we don't go into those personal spaces to clean, right? We clean around them, we clean the common spaces, we clean the high touch point spaces, but we often don't get into the employees' offices, in their desks, their telephones, their laptops, their screens. And so that's another area, right, where we can look, as well, in addition to all of the common spaces that we're already touching on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone in our chat just said break rooms where people eat. Yeah, those need to be cleaned for sure. So good points. Let's move into, I think we have a chat question, and here's what I want to think about as all those who are attending answer this. For your own companies or facilities, how do you know that your cleaning program is effective? Some had mentioned like black lights or testing. I kind of want to know, do we do that? Do companies actually use ATP testing or use the black lights? I know when I had my carpet cleaning company, we did carpet and upholstery. We used a black light to find the urine contamination from pets. That was one of the things that proved what was there. But I just wonder, is that something that's common? So feel free to comment in the chat. But how do you know your cleaning program is effective? Is it the reviews? Is it the feedback from the ones who are using your buildings? Is it the program is proven? The documentation? I know Kimberly showed a book about a plan. Make sure you have a plan. It's all written. Hold it up for us again. There it is. So, it's good stuff to be ready and prepare. Oh, 2 books. She has 2 books. All right. I have a feeling that Kristen's company has a few books as well. All right. So love the comments. Keep them coming. Periodic checks. Alicia said, good. You want to talk to your accountants and ask them how things are going. We want to know what they think, I think. Don't we? Let's move on, Martha, to our next point. This one is about budget. Consider the cost of regular cleaning versus an infection prevention approach. Whenever we provide the labor and the cleaning services, no matter what building it is, labor is a big cost, isn't it? And that's one of our main focus points here. But let's talk about this. Regular cleaning versus infection prevention. How much difference is there in cost? And some points there to consider. And I think, Evan, we'll start with you on this.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. I think these 2 terms, regular cleaning and infection prevention approach, they have to go hand in hand now. Where maybe in the past, organizations looked at when there was a budget crunch, what was the first department to be affected by it was either the janitorial, custodial, or the environmental services department. They weren't quote unquote revenue generating departments. But what COVID, especially COVID, has brought to the forefront is that an infection prevention program is paramount to the health and safety of your staff, your visitors, of your student body, of your patient population, whatever that case may be. So if you're not running an infection prevention approach to your department, you're probably missing out, and in the long run, you're going to pay for it anyway.
I would think that the buildings you clean, it might be different from one to another type of building. Like Kristen, they're cleaning so many buildings out there across the country. Some are germier than others. Kristen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think really Evan kind of hit the nail on the head there. again, right, for us, what's the cost of regular cleaning versus infection prevention approach? They do really go hand in hand, but really for us, it's going to be the selection of the disinfectants, of the chemicals that we're utilizing and the equipment that we're utilizing, being able to cover, large spaces in a short amount of time, versus, manually disinfecting, with a disinfectant and having to wait 10 minutes of a dwell time, and those hours are adding up. So really looking at the chemicals, the dwell time of your disinfectant, and utilizing, the equipment that's now, more available to us now than it ever has been after the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you. And Kimberly, I imagine there are germs and bacteria at colleges.
All over the place. But yeah, the thing that we've been, doing since the late, maybe 1999, around 2000 or so, we have been a green cleaning organization. So our entire program has been based on infection prevention. And the way we have, used our products, used our training program, has always had that in mind since we started green cleaning. And the way we had devised our training academy and what we do on a daily basis has been so effective. We really didn't have to make a whole lot of changes, even with COVID. And our program was adopted by our state education board. And it is the standard that is followed by all of the colleges in the state of Georgia. So we, took that idea on very early, and we have continued to do that up till today. As far as infection prevention is the key to what we do on a daily basis.
Oh, good to hear. And it makes total sense. Cleaning should include that because that should be the goal, protect health. A clean facility is a healthy facility. Let's talk about cleaning equipment as we move on to our next point. Because, all those attending this webinar are probably wondering, any tips on cleaning equipment, maintaining it, or types of equipment to use? And that's a big question and a very broad question. But let's start with you, Kristen. Thinking about your 11,000 employees and all the equipment you folks use, what do you think about this topic? What would you share?
Sure. So I think that the most important piece here, right, is that we're maintaining the cleaning equipment that we're having, right? We can use equipment, but if it's not maintained, if it's not clean, are we just spreading germs around the facility, right? So focusing really on making sure that the employees understand the importance of maintaining their equipment, cleaning their equipment, putting it back clean and not leaving it dirty for the next person is really going to go a long way in helping, prevent the spread of those germs across the facility.
Mm-hmm. Good points. And Evan, what do you think?
No, I agree with Kristen. Why have a cleaning program if the tools you're going to use is dirty and it's just going to spread infection rather than help clean the facility? What I would just add to that is when looking and considering equipment, does it improve productivity? Does it, and what is the efficacy of the actual machine or device that you're using? There have been some advances, but are they really advances? The use of robotics and equipment to look at that. And I completely agree with cleaning for health. The use of green cleaning equipment along with green chemicals goes a long way in a cleaning for health program.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Daniel just put in the chat, how many people have autonomous equipment, robotic equipment? I mean, when you go to a trade show like ISSA Show North America, you see it all the time. So feel free, all of you on the webinar, to put your thoughts there as far as autonomous equipment. But, one thing I notice in my cleaning career, so many companies advertise the very best and their customer service is good and they do good work. But then you look at their cleaning equipment, like their carpet cleaning, their cleaning extractors, their tools. It's kind of embarrassing to see the dirt and grime stuck to all those, and they're in the buildings cleaning. So I have a feeling that just happens, but all those here today, make it a point to keep your cleaning equipment clean to better clean the buildings you serve. We have a chat question coming up. thinking about your staff. No, these are the ones you use to clean the buildings. You want them to be motivated. You want them to do the very best work. So how do you help your staff members improve their techniques and take ownership of their work instead of just punching a clock? What do you do to make them feel good about what they do? And put that in your chats, the chat portal if you'd like, and we'll talk about that as we go through this. That could be a tough thing to do, to have them take ownership, to feel like they're part of a program rather than just punching a clock. Joel says routine inspection and follow-up training. Aaron, thorough quality control inspections creates engagement between supervisors and staff. That's good. So keep the thoughts coming. In-service training. I don't think training can be overstated, can it? And when someone takes training, they feel good about it. They know you care. You're trying to help them do their work better. Quarterly meetings, more training. Let's move on to our next point and talk about productivity. How do you empower staff to do more with less and still maintain cleaning quality? So Evan, let's start with you on this one. What do you think? How can we do that?
This is actually something that I hold dear. In order to empower staff, they have to, not only have the technical knowledge to do the job, but they have to understand why they're doing it. They have to be trained on the why. They have to understand that they are part of the infection prevention protocol. In healthcare, what we do when we go into a facility, we explain to them that they're part of a team that saves lives. And how powerful is that to know that just because you use different tools than a doctor or a nurse or somebody, you have the power to help prevent and stop sickness and possibly death. Along with those empowering of steps that we do, you want to make sure, again, you have the proper workload for your staff, depending on what areas they work in, making sure that they understand the work, why they're doing the work, and have a sufficient amount of time to complete the work. And last but not least, you have to welcome feedback. They're the people that are doing the job. They know better collectively than any manager, I would say, and they have more experience than any manager. As a collective group, we have to listen. Training them to do the why, listening, getting feedback, and helping them understand how important their job is helps empower staff.
Good points. Thank you for sharing. And Kimberly, let's go to you next. And we're getting thumbs up on the webinar, by the way. That's good.
Yeah, and Evan made some really good points. I also like what Joe Klee said in the chat. It's not about doing less. It should also be on what is only essential. What can the staff stop doing as a way to empower staff? One of the things that we had a lot of administrative support on here was, right before COVID, to get our staff members across the campus to say, hey, if our custodial staff needs to focus more on disinfection, sanitization of our facilities, we're going to have to cut back on some of the traditional things we used to do, like take out the trash in your personal office. No one comes into your house and takes out the trash in your house, right? You got to take it to the curb. So let me say, one of the things that we did, we stopped taking out trash. So you have a desk side container. The large one is for your recycling. This is the trash can. And then the staff could take their, landfill waste to a hallway container. That freed up almost 4 FTE per building from taking out just trash out of offices, break rooms, and things like that. So, and then that was a really great motivator for the custodial staff to say, hey, we really got somebody on our side. Some offices have 2 and 3 trash cans in there with 1 or 2 pieces of trash. So listening to staff, coming up with a plan that makes sense, getting your clients on board with it so that you can then focus on, some of the other things that really have a larger, payback for the efforts that you have. I don't know about most of you all, but we've had, hiring challenges, right? We've had a lot of competition. So we've had to come up with more than just training, but other ways to incentivize staff. And then once we can get them on board, how do we pay a competitive wage to keep them on board, right? And then how do we retain them? So those are some other things that we've had to do to try to empower staff to keep them on board while still maintaining a quality program.
Kimberly, those are great thoughts. And you have like 4 or 5 chats about that others are doing that or going to do that. I know I work from home. You can tell that with my home office. No one comes in and takes my trash out. So interesting points. Yeah, very good. Kristen, what do you think? Can you get all your buildings to do that too?
Yeah. So, as Kimberly mentioned, staffing has been a challenge. It's been a challenge in our industry as well. I think for us, it's investing in our employees up front, right? As I mentioned earlier, we have the mobile program where every employee is provided a mobile device. This really gives them the opportunity to own their areas. They complete audits. They have direct responsibility over their areas. We engage them in the audit process. We engage them in it with the client walks, right? I think that really, I'm safety, right? So I talk a lot about safety all day long. And I think they really go hand in hand. You have a happy employee, your quality of your building is going to improve. Your safety is going to improve. Your budget's going to improve, right? There's going to be all these things that are going to improve when you start investing in that employee. You're investing in the equipment. It might be money up front, but you're looking at the equipment that's going to be the most effective equipment and efficient equipment for your employees. So you're upgrading that and looking at what can I do, right, from my standpoint to help my employees work smarter versus working harder.
All good tips. Thank you for sharing. I think we have one more main point to consider before we get into our Q&A, and we'll spend a little time on this. Back to the basics. We might think, why do we need to talk about mixing chemicals and following directions? But I know from my career, the glug method is used all too often, and it just doesn't work. So from your perspective, Evan, Kimberly, and Kristen, what do you do with staff? What do you do with training to make this all come together so it's part of a program? So it's not a one-off, but it actually makes a difference. And Kimberly, let's start with you. We'll go to Evan and wrap up with Kristen.
Right. Well, quite simply, that glug method has been around forever, and we call it contraband here. So, but one of the things that we have worked really hard to do is to have fully functioning dilution control stations in all of our buildings. And then even one of the things that we ended up doing, as a result of COVID, we actually went to a ready-to-use disinfectant sanitizing product because we wanted to cut down on that dwell time. So we found a product that was, could work in an instant. And then we decided, you know what, even though it's going to cost us a little bit more money to buy something that's ready to use, it's going to take away that glug problem. We just had to write it into the budget, but it has helped with the efficiency of our program and being able to put the product in our client's hand to say, hey, this is what we're using and it is safe, it's green, you can use this in your office space. So many hands becomes, smaller tasks, so that we have our clients on board to help us. So when they see issues, they can have their own product that we use, which is a green seal certified product that we use to help them sanitize in their spaces, as well as to help us maintain what we're doing across the board. And then we say, do not bring anything from home. Use this, and we all know what's going on our campus as far as public health and safety.
Do they listen to you?
Yes, because if we're giving them this product and microfiber cloth, then it's like, okay, hey, well, my little bottle is running out. Let me go find my building service worker or my custodial supervisor so I can get this back in and use it in my space. or in my
Okay.
classroom, or in my lecture hall, or in my research lab.
Good stuff. Since the pandemic, I think the world has become hyper aware of chemistry more so than in the past, what it can do and the safety considerations. So nice practices, Kimberly, you guys are doing there, University of Georgia. Evan, I think I said you're next. Go ahead.
Sure. All great points Kimberly just mentioned. I would just add that the proper usage and dilution ratios of chemicals is paramount to a good cleaning for health program. Understanding and knowing where your SDS sheets are from an employee standpoint, also important. And what many organizations that we've found take for granted is the lack of training that some of their employees actually have. Everybody has the training program when an employee comes on board and they're onboarded for whatever that is, 3 days, 5 days, 2 weeks. And then they're sent off on their merry way, only to be given an annual refresher. What we try and teach organizations and what we show organizations that if you do monthly trainings, if you do weekly reminders of cleaning, weekly safety reminders, and through your audit process, if you have a good quality application tool through your audit process, if you see an individual or a departmental score dropping in a certain area, that training can be done on a remedial basis without any kind of progressive disciplinary action. And you're showing the employee you care. You're showing the employee that this matters. And it all goes back again to the why. But that training becomes paramount in this whole process.
Right. And Kristen, I have a feeling with 11,000 employees, glug might happen. What do you think?
Well, so we've for years, right, even prior to COVID, just again, right, getting back to the safety piece of it. We really focus on, our chemicals are either RTD or RTU. So they're either ready to dispense or they're ready to use. We really try to get away from using or manually diluting chemicals. It's just a higher concentrate of that chemical and an increase for something to happen with our employees. So that's really our focus and has been our focus, and our preferred chemicals would come either RTD or RTU, and that just eliminates that human error. It eliminates employees thinking that, if I add more of this and less water, it's going to be cleaner, right? And in fact, it even creates a bigger mess, a sticky mess usually. So that's one way that we did it. Another thing is looking at the chemicals, and again, looking at the dwell time. So do we have a chemical with a 10-minute dwell time, or can we find a chemical like an Oxavar TB that has a 1-minute dwell time, right? So again, just increasing that efficiency, making sure that the chemicals that we're using, we're not having to manually dilute to avoid the glug method and increase the potential for something to go wrong.
All good points. In the chat, Kimberly, you got someone's attention. They asked the question, do you have a program of how you share some of your green cleaning options with the public? Is that something you want to address?
Yeah, and what I can do is share the links with you, Jeff, and if y'all want to share that out. I didn't know if we wanted to talk about specific products or anything like that. So I can share that out with you, and then if you think appropriate, then you can pass that on for
Absolutely.
what we do here.
Yeah.
But check our website, UGA website.
Okay, so there's information there. You're muted.
Yes.
Okay. All right, very good. Let's move into, I believe we are into our Q&A now. So, and we have some questions. We have a lot of questions in the chat, but Kathleen's been compiling some for our Q&A, and we have those from you folks attending the webinar. Feel free to keep adding, and we'll keep an eye on the chat in the Q&A portal. But for our panelists, we have these questions. Well, the first one is, what is the difference between chemical and mechanical disinfection? Which is better for facilities? So who wants to handle that one? If no one says, I'll just call on somebody.
Jeff, when you're talking about mechanical, are you talking about the use of actual scrubbing with a hand and a cloth.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe the person that asked the question could add to the chat some more thoughts there. We'll come back to it then, unless you have something.
I would only say, Jeff, that the use of both is important. To clean a surface, you have to have that mechanical labor in there of wiping a surface down. And then after that, the chemical is paramount to take the disinfecting out of it.
Okay.
And I'll also add, I think it's important to think about the type of surface, because not one surface does not equal all. So I think that question definitely is multifaceted. And so there really is no question of what is best until you kind of know what you're working with, what type of surface it is, and what do you think is on there as well. Sometimes that's a big thing to consider as well.
Yeah, I know we've had episodes on Straight Talk about the use of microfibers as being a way to remove contaminants. And I love microfibers myself. Kristen, before we move to our next question, anything to add here?
No, I think that Evan and Kimberly covered that well.
Okay. All right. Here's our next one. And let's go to you, Kristen, on this one. It's really about clients. How do you get buy-in from the client to allocate the right resources for proper cleaning and disinfection?
You know, I think that that's hard, right? Budgets are tight across, everywhere. So sometimes it's having to, as a company, take on that upfront cost, right, of that product, and then determine other ways that we can kind of get that on the back end. But I think another way is to invite the client. So part of what our teams do, at our sites across the country are, include the clients in those audits, right? Include them in kind of every step of the process so that they are aware, and it's not just us telling them, but we're also showing them as well. So we're showing them the results of what we do.
Good points. And Kimberly, anything to add there?
I think the only thing that I'll add there, I think it's also important to reframe your scope of work. That's one of the things that we had to do as well. Right as we were going into COVID, and we have kept some of those same things as far as what is the frequency and what is our scope of work, so we can talk from the same kind of pulpit, so to speak. I think in the past, as we talked about, even just with the trash and the waste removal out of offices, to have a really tight framework of what exactly going to be the expectations of what we're doing to the clients, so that they understand what service we are providing, and then what service is going to be extra, and we might charge you for that, or it's not going to happen as frequently as it might have happened in the past. So changing that scope of work so it really reflects what you're doing, so that you can talk about the frequencies and kind of get everybody to understand what success looks like.
Good. Evan? Jeff, the only thing I would add to what Kimberly and Kristen said is, I think for any custodial, janitorial, environmental services program to be successful, you have to have buy-in from the top. And that buy-in starts with education. And it really is not about educating the employees. It's about educating your client. A lot of service providers, and as a consultant myself, our job is to do that education and to provide, again, the why of why we're doing that. And it's extremely important to a client's well-being and their success to have that kind of a program, to have a cleaning for health type of program in their facility. But if they don't understand it and they don't buy into it, you'll never have it.
All right. Good points. Our next question, somewhat similar to this. How do you successfully market your effective sanitization and disinfection services? So might be more of a Kristen question, since it's about selling services.
Yeah, it is. Again, I think it varies by client. I can, I'm going back to, the answers that we just provided and what Evan just said. It's about, getting them to buy into it, getting them to buy into, the programs, into the methods that are going to be used. I saw a question pop up here a minute ago on, the effectiveness of using something like a mister, right? So, it's doing the research, it's providing the data up front, and engaging them in every step of the way.
Good. Anything to add, Kimberly or Evan?
I think the only thing I'll also ask that Evan kind of touched on it, Kristen has touched on it as well, that training factor is huge because I don't have to sell the program. If my staff understand what they're doing every day, they actually sell the program, right? We have close to 600 building service worker employees or custodians, right? They sell that program each and every day, from their customer service, when the customers have questions and they can answer those questions and tell them what they're doing, why they're doing that. They're actually the best ambassadors that we have.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference, isn't there, between a BSC and a facility, one selling services, the other's doing it themselves. So obviously there's going to be some difference in operation there, but everyone has the same goal: cleaning, disinfecting, being healthy. Evan, I don't think you had anything to add to this.
No, I
Okay.
really didn't. I agreed with what both Kristen and Kimberly said, and you're right. Coming from whether it's the BSC or self-op, it really is the end goal is the same. So and I get the pleasure to work with both.
Yeah, very good. There's a question here about touchless systems. What do you think of them? Touchless cleaning systems.
I think they're great. I think they can be great, but I think you have to keep in mind that, it doesn't take away the need to clean the surface first, right? So we can use the misters, for disinfecting, for sanitizing, but we still need that first step of removing the dirt and grime from the surface, so that mister can do its job.
Okay. Looks like we're good there. Here's another one. What are your thoughts on using ionization equipment for disinfection? As this process may use less disinfectant, will disinfection efficacy diminish? Whew. Technical question. Any takers there?
Jeff, the only thing I would say on any of these products, whether it's touchless or ionization products, and there are good products out there, I would just caution people to do their homework. Most of the time, everybody is getting their information on efficacy and data from a manufacturer. And I would almost caution that that's not the place to go looking. Do your research, look into the infection preventionists' point of views, any of the research data that's done by some of the better organizations out there that don't have skin in the game.
All right, good points. Anything else, Kristen?
No, I think also just to add to that, it's just assuring that you're using the right chemical with the machine that you're choosing.
Yeah, and that, again, I just echo that. I mean, we're not scientists, right? They actually pay people, they have labs that do this kind of stuff. And I always say, I'm not going to listen 100% to any vendor, right? And if I know more than the vendor, I'm using the wrong vendor.
Good point. Good point. Let's wrap up our webinar with one more question. And I think we can all contribute to this because we're about out of time. We have someone that wants to know what's the best way to clean the equipment, such as mops, buckets, and auto scrubbers. Any best practices there as far as maintaining cleaning equipment to make sure it's all consistent, all good all the time? That'll be our last question. Kimberly wants this one to start.
I'll just say we are using the product that we're using throughout our regular program. And when we have equipment checks, If the equipment doesn't measure up, that's a training moment, because we can't be the forefront at the forefront of public health if our equipment and our materials don't match up, right? And that's one of the first things that we train, that you're going to take the time to respect the equipment and to thoroughly clean and have it ready for your next workshop every day.
Very true. Kristen?
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, it's going to be making sure that it's done on a nightly or daily basis after each use. You wait till the end of the week, you push it off to the end of the month, that's when you're going to start to have issues with your equipment. So making sure, you do a pre-inspection of your equipment, you're doing a post-inspection of your equipment, and you're putting it away just in the same fashion that you got it. And again, as Kimberly mentioned, using the same chemicals that we're using to clean, the same chemicals that we're using to clean the equipment as well.
Yeah, I'll share one quick thing for myself. Every time I pull up my car in my garage, I grab a hand vac and I vacuum it. It takes me about 45 seconds. My friends make fun of me, but I'm like, their cars are filthy. I hope they're not watching this webinar, but it's just less than a minute once a day or every couple of days, and the car's clean all the time. So maybe the same thought can apply to maintaining equipment as well. Evan, wrap it up for us.
Sure. This was great, Jeff, and I want to thank you and ISSA and CMM for doing this. As far as the cleaning of equipment goes, every piece of hard equipment comes with instructions on the proper care of that equipment. Anything that you're using, whether it be mops, dry mops, wet mops, there is a specific type of care for those. I all too many times see people just hanging dirty mops and wringing them out in slop sinks and things like that. I would rather see them go to a disposable system of mops or microfiber than what they're doing there, because again, they're not adhering to infection control best practices, and just it all goes through that cleaning for health program, the way you care for your equipment, and you do a great job on your car, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a car, but I think if people, the employees you have, your workers, spend a few minutes just taking care of the details, it all adds to the program. Well, everyone, thanks for attending our webinar today. Evan, Kristen, Kimberly, thank you so much for giving up your valuable time to share your expertise with the CMM audience and the ISSA world. So we'll have this recording ready in a few days. Those who registered will get the link to the recording. It'll be on cmmonline.com. And if you're not a member of ISSA, sign up and join the world of ISSA. Thank you.